She thought love had passed her by again, that another carefully arranged evening would end in silence and cold coffee. But when two small girls in matching yellow raincoats pushed open the door of the seaside cafe, their boots dripping salt water and their eyes full of quiet urgency, the story she expected unraveled. They weren't supposed to be there. Their father had no idea they'd come. And what they were about to say would turn a failed blind date into the first page of a family she never knew she was meant to have. Before we continue, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. It means the world to us to know our stories are reaching you. Elena had spent 3 years studying coral restoration in Indonesia. 3 years focused on rebuilding ecosystems beneath the waves, while her personal life remained carefully, deliberately shallow. She'd returned to her coastal hometown 2 months ago when the research grant ended, and her older sister Lena had immediately appointed herself as matchmaker-in-chief. He's quiet, kind, and he builds boats with his hands, Lena had promised over the phone that morning. His name is Nate Callahan. You'd like him, Elena. He's not like the others. But kind men didn't leave you waiting in a cafe that smelled like coffee and pity. Kind men didn't circle a date on their calendar and then forget to show up. Elena traced the rim of her untouched latte and wondered, not for the first time, if she was simply meant to be alone with her tide charts and sea glass collections, her work and her solitude. The server passed by with a sympathetic smile that made Elena's cheeks burn. She reached for her coat, ready to salvage what remained of her dignity. That was when the door chimed. 2 small girls stood in the entrance, rain dripping from matching yellow raincoats that were 2 sizes too big. They couldn't have been older than 6. Identical dark braids hung over their shoulders. Identical seashell necklaces caught the cafe's warm light. For a moment, they simply stood there, scanning the room with the focused intensity of rescue workers searching wreckage. Then their eyes locked onto Elena. The bolder of the 2 marched straight toward her table, boots squeaking against the wooden floor, her sister trailing behind like a quieter shadow. Elena's confusion flickered into something sharper as they approached. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Are you Miss Elena?" the first girl asked, her voice clear and confident despite the rain dripping from her coat. "Yes?" "I'm Mira. This is Luna." She gestured to her twin with the practiced efficiency of someone used to making introductions. "Our daddy's sorry he's late." The world tilted on its axis. His daughters. The man she'd been waiting for had daughters. 2 beautiful, soaking wet daughters who were currently standing beside her table, looking at her with eyes that held both apology and something else. Something that looked like careful, fragile hope. Lena hadn't mentioned children, hadn't mentioned any of this. "Daddy didn't know we were coming," Luna whispered, glancing nervously toward the door, as if their father might appear at any moment and find them here, uninvited and dripping on the cafe floor. Elena's mouth opened, then closed. Her brain scrambled to catch up with the sudden shift in reality. "Where is he? Where's your dad?" "Emergency at the marina," Mira said matter-of-factly, sliding into the booth across from Elena without waiting for an invitation. Luna followed her sister's lead, moving with the quiet grace of someone used to staying in another's shadow. "The Marigold has a hull breach. He had to go fix it or she'd sink by morning." "But he was really excited about tonight," Luna added quickly, as if this detail mattered more than the sinking boat, more than the broken plans. Her fingers twisted the hem of her yellow raincoat. "He circled it on the kitchen calendar with a star. He even polished his boots," Mira said, and there was something in her voice, a tremor of importance that made Elena's chest tighten. "He never polishes his boots. Never." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Not quite her heart breaking, but something shifting, making room for a feeling she couldn't yet name. She looked at these 2 small girls who had walked through the rain, who had somehow found her in a cafe full of strangers, who were trying so hard to explain why their father wasn't here. She raised her hand to catch the server's attention. 2 hot apple ciders with cinnamon sticks, please." The transformation was immediate. Both girls' eyes lit up with a brightness that pushed back against the gray evening beyond the windows. Mira's shoulders relaxed slightly. Luna smiled, really smiled. "For the first time since walking through the door, there's a babysitter waiting outside," Elena said gently, though she found herself hoping they wouldn't leave just yet. "Does she know you're in here?" "Mrs. Chen's in the blue car," Mira confirmed, pointing vaguely toward the rain-streaked windows. "We told her we'd be real quick. Just enough time to explain so you wouldn't leave." They weren't quick. They told her everything, and Elena found herself leaning forward, drawn into their story like a tide pulling her toward shore. Mira spoke first, her words tumbling out with the enthusiasm of someone who had been holding them in for too long. Their father, Nate Callahan, had spent the morning humming while making breakfast. Blueberry pancakes. Luna interjected, shaped like boats. He'd changed shirts 3 times, Mira continued, finally settling on the blue button-down that Luna said made his eyes look like the ocean on a clear day. He'd written a note on a yellow sticky pad and stuck it to the dashboard of his truck. Elena, 6:30, don't be late. He put it right next to the compass Mommy gave him, Luna said softly, her fingers still wrapped around the warm mug. So he'd see it every time he looked up. Elena's heart stuttered at the mention of their mother, but she didn't interrupt. She sensed they needed to tell this story their own way, in their own time. He was nervous, Mira admitted, taking a careful sip of her cider. We could tell because he kept checking his watch even though it was only 9 in the morning, and he asked us 3 times if we thought you'd like him. What did you say? Elena asked, surprised by how much she wanted to know the answer. We said, anyone who makes pancakes shaped like boats and doesn't get mad when we track sand in the house is pretty likable, Mira said with a shrug that tried to be casual but didn't quite succeed. Luna set down her mug and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He only hums when the sea is calm, and when his heart is too. The weight of that statement settled over the table like snow, quiet and heavy. Elena looked at these 2 girls, really looked at them, and saw beneath their bravery to something else. A kind of careful watching, as if they'd learned to read the weather in their father's moods, to navigate by the stars of his emotions. How long has it been since he hummed? Elena heard herself ask. The twins exchanged a glance, that silent communication that only siblings who've weathered storms together can manage. A long time, Mira finally said. Not since before. Before what? Luna's hand went to the seashell necklace at her throat, her fingers tracing its smooth surface with the automatic gesture of long practice. Before Mommy sailed away. The cafe noise seemed to dim, or maybe Elena's hearing simply narrowed to focus entirely on these 2 girls and the story they were trying to tell. Sailed away? Elena asked carefully, though she already suspected the answer, could feel it in the way Luna held that necklace, in the past tense they used when mentioning their mother. 18 months ago, Mira said, and for the first time since sitting down, her confident voice wavered. There was a storm, a bad one. She was working at the lighthouse that night. The waves were 30 feet high, Daddy said. The boat capsized on the rocks. If you're moved by this story, please consider subscribing. It helps us continue bringing you these moments that matter. Elena's throat tightened. She reached across the table without thinking, her hand covering Luna's smaller one. The little girl didn't pull away. I'm so sorry, Elena said, and the words felt desperately inadequate for the size of the loss these children carried. Daddy takes care of us now, Mira said, lifting her chin with fierce pride that reminded Elena of tiny birds puffing up their feathers against the cold. He does everything. He learned to braid our hair. Even though the first 100 times it looked like tangled fishing line. He uses sailor's knots, Luna added, a small smile ghosting across her face. French braids are basically figure-8 knots, he says, and he reads us bedtime stories, Mira continued. He tries to do them in Mommy's voice. He's not very good at it. His voice is too deep, and he can't do the princess parts right. But we don't tell him that. Elena felt tears pressing at the back of her eyes and blinked them away. What else does he do? The question opened something in both girls. They began talking over each other, their voices building on each other's memories like waves layering on a shore. He fixed their dolls when they broke, using boat resin that left them slightly sticky but whole. He let them help in his workshop, teaching them the names of tools and woods, the difference between teak and mahogany, how to read the grain. He built them a floating dock, Mira said, her eyes lighting up. A special one that extended from the shore toward the lighthouse where their mother had worked. So we can visit her, Luna explained. Safely. The currents are strong there, but Daddy's dock has railings and it's anchored deep. He checks the bolts every week. Every Sunday, Mira said. After pancakes, we walk out on the dock and leave a paper boat with a candle in the bay. Daddy says it's so Mommy knows we're thinking of her, that her light still guides us even though she's gone. Elena had to look away, focusing on the rain streaming down the windows, giving herself a moment to gather the emotions threatening to spill over. When she looked back, both girls were watching her with an intensity that seemed too old for their years. He keeps her lighthouse logbook on his nightstand, Luna said quietly. Sometimes we catch him reading it late at night. She used to write about the ships she watched, the weather patterns, sometimes just thoughts about her day, about us. There's a whole page about the day we were born, Mira added. She wrote it during her shift the next night, about how she'd watched the sunrise that morning from the hospital window and thought about how she'd get to watch us grow up under the same Sunday, how she'd teach us to read the tides and respect the sea. The cafe had grown busier around them, the dinner crowd filtering in, but Elena barely noticed. She was completely absorbed in this story, in these children who had walked through the rain to make sure she understood something important about their father. The calendar, Elena said, remembering what they'd mentioned earlier. You said he marked today with a star? Both girls nodded enthusiastically. He only uses stars for important days, Mira explained. Our birthday has a star. Christmas has a star. The anniversary of the day Mommy died has a star, but that one's blue, not gold. Today's star is gold, Luna said. We asked him what it meant, and he got all red in the face and said it was just a reminder. But we know better. We saw him looking at your picture on his phone. My picture? Elena's eyebrows rose. Your sister sent it to him, Mira said. We weren't spying, not really. His phone was on the counter, and we just happened to see. You were on a boat, wearing a blue tank top, holding some kind of coral thing. You were smiling. Elena remembered that photo. Lena had taken it last year during a visit to Indonesia. One of the rare moments when Elena had looked up from her work long enough to acknowledge the camera. She'd been holding a healthy coral fragment, celebrating a successful transplant. She'd forgotten Lena even had that picture. He looked at it a lot this week, Luna said. And this morning, while we were eating breakfast, he told us about you, about how you study coral and how you lived in Indonesia, and how Aunt Lena said you were smart and kind and loved the ocean as much as we do. He said he hoped you'd like him, Mira added. He said he knew he wasn't much, just a guy who fixes boats and has 2 kids and a cottage that always smells like sawdust. But he hoped maybe that would be enough. Elena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, willing the tears to stay put. Then the phone rang, Mira continued, her voice dropping as the story took its inevitable turn. It was Mr. Peterson from the marina. The Marigold was taking on water. She's an old fishing boat, been in Mr. Peterson's family for 40 years. He was panicking. Daddy grabbed his tools and ran. He forgot his phone, Luna said, pointing to the problem that had brought them here. It's still in his toolbox. He always forgets it when he's working. Says phones and power tools don't mix. We heard him before he left, Mira said. He was standing in the doorway and he looked back at the calendar at that gold star, and he said a word we're not supposed to say. Then he said he'd be back in an hour, Luna continued. That he'd make it on time. That nothing was going to stop him from meeting you. But it's been almost 3 hours, Mira said, checking a watch that was too big for her wrist, probably her father's. And we knew. We knew he'd lose track of time trying to save that boat. He always does. When something needs fixing, he can't walk away until it's done. So we told Mrs. Chen we needed to run an errand, Luna said. And we came here, Mira finished. Because Daddy doesn't have his phone, and he doesn't know you're waiting. And we didn't want you to think he forgot. We didn't want you to leave before he could get here and show you that he's worth waiting for. The silence that followed was broken only by the rain and the distant murmur of other conversations, other lives continuing around them. Elena looked at these 2 extraordinary children who had taken it upon themselves to save their father's one gold-starred day, who loved him enough to brave the rain and approach a stranger and tell the painful, beautiful story of their family. He is, Elena said finally, her voice rough with emotion. He's absolutely worth waiting for. Both girls smiled, real smiles that transformed their faces. Elena checked her phone. 7:28. She made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff and trusting the water below would catch her. Do you know what your dad's favorite food is? The girl's eyes widened with understanding and excitement. Fish tacos from Captain Rico's, they said in unison. With the mango salsa, Mira added. Extra lime. Luna specified. Elena stood, leaving money on the table for the ciders and a generous tip. Then let's go tell Mrs. Chen we're taking a field trip to the marina. Your dad shouldn't have to save a boat and miss dinner. The girls erupted from their seats, yellow raincoats flapping as they raced toward the door. Elena followed, pulling her own jacket tight against the wind that had picked up since she'd arrived. Mrs. Chen's blue hatchback idled at the curb, wipers cutting arcs through the rain. The older woman rolled down her window as they approached, her expression shifting from surprise to knowing amusement as Elena explained the plan. "Those two have been worried sick all evening, Mrs. Chen said, glancing at Mira and Luna, who were already buckling themselves into Elena's car without asking permission. "Nate's going to have a heart attack when he sees you all show up. The good kind, I hope," Elena said. Mrs. Chen smiled. "The very best kind. That man needs more good surprises in his life." Captain Rico's was a narrow takeout window wedged between a surf shop and a bait store. The girls pressed their faces against Elena's car windows while she ran through the rain to order 4 fish tacos with mango salsa, extra lime. She added chips and tres leches cake because the man was saving a boat in a storm and deserved dessert. The drive to the marina took 12 minutes through streets slicked black with rain. The girls directed her past the tourist docks with their pleasure boats and yacht clubs, down toward the working waterfront, where fishing vessels and repair shops crowded against the water. The air smelled like diesel and salt and creosote. "There," Mira pointed to a cluster of lights beneath a corrugated metal overhang. "That's Daddy's truck." Elena parked beside a pickup that had seen better decades. Tools cluttered the bed. The yellow sticky note still clung to the dashboard, visible through the rain-streaked windshield. The marina stretched before them, a labyrinth of docks and moorings, masts rising like a forest of stripped trees against the dark sky. Somewhere in that tangle of boats and rigging, Nate Callahan was working. "He'll be at the repair slips," Luna said, already out of the car, takeout bag clutched to her chest like precious cargo. They found him under a tarp stretched between 2 posts, creating a makeshift shelter that barely kept the rain off. The Marigold lay tipped on her side, exposing a hull that had seen too many seasons. Nate knelt beside a gash in the wood, welding torch in hand, sparks cascading into the puddles at his feet. 2 other men worked nearby, older fishermen in rubber boots and worn jackets, holding lights and passing tools. None of them noticed the small parade approaching, until Mira shouted, "Daddy!" Nate jerked upright so fast he nearly dropped the torch. He killed the flame and lifted his welding mask, and Elena saw his face for the first time. Lena had said he was handsome in an understated way, and that was true but incomplete. He had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors, lines around his eyes from squinting into sun and wind. Dark hair curled slightly from the humidity. His hands, even from a distance, looked strong and scarred and capable. But it was his expression that caught Elena. The rapid shift from shock to panic to something that might have been wonder as his eyes moved from his daughters to her. "What are you doing here?" The words came out hoarse. He set down the torch and crossed the distance in 4 long strides, kneeling in front of the girls, hands going automatically to check them over. "Is everything okay? Is Mrs. Chen?" "We're fine," Mira said quickly. "We brought you dinner. And Miss Elena." His eyes lifted to Elena's then, and the full weight of the situation seemed to hit him. He stood slowly, running a hand through his hair, leaving streaks of soot across his forehead. "I'm so sorry," he said, and his voice carried the kind of exhaustion that came from more than just physical work. "This isn't how I wanted you to meet them. This isn't how any of this was supposed to go." Elena stepped closer, into the shelter of the tarp, rain drumming overhead. They didn't crash the date. They rescued it. The 2 fishermen had gone suddenly quiet, watching with unabashed interest. Mira thrust the takeout bag at one of them. "Captain Rico's," she announced. "Fish tacos. You should eat them before they get cold." The older men took the hint and the food, retreating toward a nearby workshop with poorly concealed grins. "We didn't want her to think you forgot," Luna said, moving to her father's side and slipping her small hand into his large, calloused one. "We told her about the calendar and the boots and everything." Nate's eyes closed briefly, and Elena saw him swallow hard. When he opened them again, he was looking at her with an expression that held apology and hope and a vulnerability that made her chest ache. "Everything?" he asked his daughters. "About Mommy," Luna said simply. "About the lighthouse and the paper boats and how you're trying." He crouched down again, gathering both girls close, despite the sawdust and boat resin covering his clothes. "You two are either going to be master diplomats or get me in serious trouble someday." "Probably both," Mira said cheerfully. Nate looked up at Elena, still holding his daughters. "I did want to be there. I've been watching the clock for 2 hours trying to finish this repair. The Marigold belongs to Harold Peterson. His father built her. His grandfather fished from her. I couldn't let her sink. I know, Elena said. They told me. About the boat and about a lot of other things. I'm almost afraid to ask what else they shared. That you use sailor's knots for braiding, Elena said. That you make pancakes shaped like boats. That you keep a lighthouse logbook on your nightstand. Something shifted in his expression, a deepening of the vulnerability into something raw. They told you about Sarah. Elena nodded. About the storm. About how you're raising them alone. About how today had a gold star. It was supposed to be perfect, he said quietly. I had it all planned. Show up on time. Don't talk too much about boats. Try not to mention that I come with a complicated life and 2 kids and enough baggage to sink a yacht. Your daughters beat you to it, Elena said. And honestly, I'm glad they did. She moved closer, settling onto one of the upturned crates that served as makeshift furniture in the workspace. Mira immediately claimed the crate beside her. Luna brought napkins from somewhere. The careful hostess even here. We brought extra tacos, Luna said. And tres leches cake. Nate looked at Elena, at his daughters, at the food being unpacked like a picnic in the middle of a boat repair. You brought me dinner. Your daughters brought you hope, Elena corrected. I'm just the delivery system. They ate there under the tarp, with rain turning the world beyond into watercolor. Nate's hands shook slightly as he unwrapped the first taco, and Elena noticed he kept glancing at her as if she might vanish, as if this might be some exhaustion-induced hallucination. The girls filled the spaces between bites with chatter, telling their father everything they'd told Elena, embellishing details, correcting each other's timeline. Nate listened with the attention of someone who'd learned to hear what his children weren't saying as much as what they were. I practiced what I'd say tonight, he admitted when the girls had finally wound down, distracted by their cake, standing in front of the bathroom mirror like an idiot. Hi, I'm Nate. I build boats, and I'm trying to build a life again. How'd it sound? Elena asked. Terrible. Like a bad personals ad. He wiped mango salsa from his thumb. I was going to leave out the part about the kids until at least the second date. Give you a chance to run before you got too invested. I study coral reefs, Elena said. I spent 3 years rebuilding ecosystems that had been destroyed by storms and pollution and human carelessness. I know a thing or two about reconstruction, about how the most beautiful reefs are the ones that grew back stronger after they broke. Nate went very still. Your daughters walked through the rain to make sure I didn't give up on you, Elena continued. They told me about a man who polishes boots for important occasions and marks calendars with gold stars and builds floating docks so his children can visit their mother's lighthouse safely. That's not baggage. That's love. It's also chaos, he said. School plays and scraped knees and permission slips I forget to sign. Bedtimes that stretch an hour past bedtime. A house that smells like sawdust and always has sand in the corners no matter how much I sweep. I've spent 3 years living on research boats, Elena said. I'm used to chaos, and I like sawdust. It smells like creation. Mira looked up from her cake, mango cream on her nose. Does this mean you'll come for Sunday pancakes? The question hung in the wet air. Elena looked at this man with soot on his face and hope in his eyes, at these 2 girls who'd appointed themselves guardians of their father's heart, at this makeshift family dinner happening in a boat repair slip during a storm. I'd love to come for Sunday pancakes, she said. But only if they're shaped like seagulls this time. I've seen enough boat pancakes in my life. Luna's laugh was like wind chimes. Mira pumped her fist in victory, and Nate smiled, really smiled, for what his daughters later said was the first time in 18 months. The Sunday pancakes became a ritual. Elena arrived at Nate's cottage the following weekend with a bag of fresh blueberries from the farmer's market, and uncertainty knotted in her chest. The house sat at the end of a gravel road that dead-ended at the water, a weathered Cape Cod with blue shutters and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Wind chimes made from sea glass hung from the eaves, catching morning light and throwing rainbow fractals across the worn wooden steps. Mira and Luna burst through the screen door before Elena could knock, still in pajamas printed with starfish and shells. You came! Luna grabbed her hand and pulled her inside. The house did smell like sawdust, just as Nate had promised, but also like coffee and vanilla and the particular scent of a home where people actually lived. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. Boots in graduated sizes lined up by the door. A coat rack sagged under the weight of yellow raincoats and life jackets, and one battered leather jacket that had to be Nate's. He stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the concentration of someone defusing a bomb. He'd clearly showered, his hair still damp, wearing jeans and a faded gray Henley with the sleeves pushed up. When he turned and saw her, relief flooded his features. "You actually showed up," he said. "You sound surprised." "I had about a 60% confidence level." He gestured to the griddle where batter was forming the rough shape of a seagull. "I'm not great at birds. Fair warning." The pancakes looked like seagulls, the way constellations look like their namesakes, requiring significant imagination and generous interpretation. Elena loved them immediately. They ate on the porch with the ocean stretching gray-green to the horizon. The girls dominated the conversation, asking Elena questions with the intensity of journalists. What was her favorite fish? Did she ever get scared diving? Had she seen sharks? What was Indonesia like? Did she miss it? Nate mostly listened, occasionally interjecting to remind his daughters that people needed to breathe between questions. But Elena caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, studying her responses, seeing how she fit into this space he'd built for his family. After breakfast, they walked to the floating dock. It extended 30 feet from the rocky shoreline, constructed from treated lumber and marine-grade hardware that would outlast them all. Railings ran on both sides, sturdy and waist-high. At the end, a small platform provided space to sit and watch the lighthouse that rose from the rocks a quarter-mile offshore. The structure was automated now, Luna explained. No keeper required. But it still threw its beam across the water every night. Still guided ships through the channel. "Mommy used to take us out there in the rowboat," Mira said, sitting cross-legged at the dock's end, waves slapping the pilings below. "Before we could even walk, she'd bundle us up and row us out. Daddy has pictures." Nate settled beside his daughters, and after a moment's hesitation, Elena joined them. The four of them sat in a line, legs dangling, watching the lighthouse. "She loved that place," Nate said quietly. "Said it was the best job in the world. 6-hour shifts watching the water, reading, thinking. She kept logs of everything. Which ships passed, weather patterns, migrating whales, sometimes just thoughts." "Do you still read them?" Elena asked. "Every night. It's like having a conversation with her." He glanced at Elena. "That probably sounds strange." "It sounds like love." They stayed until the girls got cold, then walked back to the cottage where Nate showed Elena his workshop. It occupied a converted garage behind the house, every wall hung with tools in careful organization. Half-finished projects occupied workbenches. The air smelled like wood shavings and varnish. "This is where the magic happens," he said with self-deprecating humor. "Boat repair, custom furniture, the occasional birdhouse when the girls con me into it." "You built their beds," Elena said, recognizing the craftsmanship in the pieces she'd glimpsed through an open bedroom door. "Toddler beds shaped like boats. Sarah's idea. She sketched the design while she was pregnant, made me promise I'd build them." He ran his hand along a workbench worn smooth by years of use. "Took me 3 months. I'm better with repairs than creation." "I don't believe that," Elena said, looking around at the evidence of his skill. "Believe it. I can fix anything. But making something from nothing? That terrifies me." She understood he wasn't just talking about woodworking. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Elena started spending Wednesdays at the cottage, arriving after the girls finished school. She'd help with homework while Nate cooked dinner, his kitchen skills improving with practice and necessity. Thursday evenings, Nate would drive to Elena's apartment near the university where she'd taken a teaching position, and they'd walk the beach while his daughter stayed with Mrs. Chen. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about learning to parent alone, about the terror of braiding hair for the first time, about school conferences where he was the only father in a room full of mothers, about nights when the grief still hit him like rogue waves, unexpected and devastating, about the guilt of wanting to be happy again. Elena shared her own fears, about 3 years spent hiding in her work, because relationships required vulnerability she wasn't sure she possessed, about watching her sister build a family while Elena built coral nurseries, and wondering if she'd made the wrong choice, about coming home and feeling like she'd run out of places to run. "I'm not good at this," she admitted one Thursday as they sat on the beach watching the sunset. "At being part of something, at letting people need me." "You're better at it than you think," Nate said. "The girls ask about you constantly. When's Elena coming? Can Elena come to my school play? Do you think Elena likes cats because we saw a kitten at the shelter?" Elena's heart stuttered. "Do they want a cat? They want you to be part of deciding if we get a cat." He picked up a piece of sea glass, turning it in his fingers. "They're trying to make you family. Is that what you want?" He looked at her then, direct and honest. "I want whatever you're ready for. But yes, if I'm being completely honest, which apparently I'm trying to be these days, yes, I'd like you to be family." 3 months in, Elena started keeping a toothbrush at the cottage. 4 months in, she had a drawer. 5 months in, she couldn't remember what her life had looked like before Sunday pancakes and Wednesday homework sessions, and the sound of 2 little girls calling her name. The school play happened in November. Luna played a mouse in a production of Charlotte's Web that took liberties with the source material. Mira worked the curtain with the gravity of someone managing a Broadway production. Elena sat between Nate and Mrs. Chen in the crowded auditorium, and when Luna forgot her lines and froze, Mira whispered them loudly from backstage, and the whole audience laughed with affection rather than judgment. Walking to the car afterward, Luna's hand slipped into Elena's without fanfare or announcement, just a small hand seeking a larger one. And Elena felt something lock into place inside her chest. Thanksgiving arrived with an invitation from Lena to join the family gathering, but Nate asked if they could do something smaller, just the 4 of them. They cooked together in his small kitchen, the girls making place cards decorated with drawings of things they were thankful for. Mira drew the ocean. Luna drew the lighthouse. Nate drew a boat. Elena appeared on all 3 cards, rendered in crayon and marker and colored pencil. "I don't know what to say," Elena said, looking at the pictures. "Say you'll stay," Luna said simply. That night, after the girls were asleep, Nate and Elena sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, drinking wine and watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the water. "I need to tell you something," Nate said. Elena's stomach dropped. She recognized that tone. "I'm falling in love with you," he continued. "Actually, that's not accurate. I've already fallen. Past tense. Done deal." He set down his wine glass. "And I know that's fast and possibly insane given that we met because my children ambushed you in a cafe. But there it is. I'm in love with you, and I needed you to know before this goes any further." The lighthouse beam passed over them, throwing their shadows long across the porch. "That's convenient," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "Because I'm in love with you too. With all of you. This whole chaotic, beautiful mess." He kissed her then, gentle and sure, tasting like wine and promise. December brought storms that battered the coast and kept Nate busy with repair work. Elena spent a weekend helping him patch the Marigold's deck while the girls did homework in the workshop, the space heater glowing orange. She learned the difference between caulk and sealant, between oak and teak, between the kind of damage you could fix and the kind you just had to work around. "You're getting good at this," Nate said, watching her apply marine epoxy with steady hands. "I like working with my hands. Coral restoration is similar. Everything's about patience and precision and respecting what came before." "Sarah would have liked you," he said suddenly. "She would have appreciated how you don't try to replace her, how you make space for her in this." Elena set down the epoxy gun.
"She made you. Made them. I wouldn't want to replace that even if I could."
Christmas Eve, they visited the lighthouse. Not the floating dock this time, but an actual trip in Nate's restored dinghy. All 4 of them bundled in life jackets and wool blankets. The water was calm, the sky sharp with stars. They motored slowly across the channel, and Nate tied up at the old keeper's dock that wasn't used anymore but still held. They climbed the spiral stairs to the light room, the girls leading the way with practiced familiarity. The automated beacon rotated overhead, its machinery humming. Through the windows, the coast spread out in a jeweled arc of lights. "We used to come here every Christmas," Mira said. "When Mommy worked here, she'd make hot chocolate in a thermos," Luna added. "And we'd watch the ships pass. They'd brought hot chocolate this time too, in the same thermos." They sat on the floor of the light room, passing the cup between them, and told stories. The girls shared memories of their mother. Nate talked about the early days, meeting Sarah at a boat show, her interview for the lighthouse keeper position, the wedding on this very dock. Elena contributed stories about her own family, her work, the life she'd led before walking into the Salty Anchor Cafe. "I have a tradition," Nate said as they prepared to leave. He pulled 4 paper boats from his jacket pocket, each one carefully folded. "We usually do this from the floating dock on Sundays, but Christmas Eve feels right." He handed one to each of them. Inside each boat, a tea light candle. They climbed down to the keeper's dock and knelt at the edge. Nate lit the candles one by one, and they set the boats on the water. The current caught them, carrying them away from the lighthouse, out toward the open sea. 4 small lights floating on dark water. "What do we wish for?" Elena asked. "You don't wish," Luna said. "You remember. You send light to the people you love." They watched until the boats disappeared into darkness. On the trip back, Luna fell asleep against Elena's shoulder. Mira dozed against her father's chest. Nate steered with one hand, the other resting on Elena's knee. The lighthouse beam swept over them, regular as a heartbeat. And Elena thought about light and love and the way both could guide you home. January came with news that made Elena's hands shake when she opened the email. A research position in Australia, significant grant funding, 2 years minimum commitment, the kind of opportunity she'd spent her career working toward. She showed Nate the email on a Wednesday evening while the girls built a blanket fort in the living room. He read it twice, his expression carefully neutral. "This is incredible. This is everything you wanted." "It was," Elena said. "Past tense, Elena." He set down his phone. "You can't give this up. Not for me. Not for anyone." "I'm not giving it up for you. I'm choosing something different than what I wanted 6 months ago." She looked toward the living room where the girls were arguing amicably about fort architecture. People change. Priorities shift. In 6 months? That's not enough time to make this kind of decision. How long did it take you to know you loved Sarah? He was quiet for a moment. 3 weeks. But that's different. Why? Because I was young and stupid and lucky. He ran his hands through his hair. You're talking about your career, your life's work. I'm talking about my life, Elena corrected. My work is part of that, but it's not everything anymore. She declined the Australia position and accepted a permanent faculty role at the university. She told herself she was making the right choice. Most days, she believed it. February 14th fell on a Wednesday. Nate hired Mrs. Chen for the evening and took Elena to the Salty Anchor Cafe, requesting the same corner table where she'd waited 6 months earlier. "I need to tell you something," he said after they'd ordered. Elena's pulse kicked up. "Okay. I'm terrified I'm ruining your life." The words came out in a rush. "That you're going to wake up in 5 years and resent me and the girls for being the reason you gave up coral reefs and research and the career you worked so hard for?" "Nate, let me finish. Please." He took her hands across the table. "I'm terrified of that. But I'm more terrified of losing you. Of not at least asking the question that's been burning a hole in my brain for the last month." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Elena's breath stopped. "This isn't how I planned this," he said. "I had a whole speech prepared. Something eloquent about second chances and found families, and how you walked into our lives and made everything make sense again. But I'm forgetting all of it because I'm shaking, and apparently I'm terrible at proposals." "You haven't proposed yet," Elena pointed out, tears already starting. "Right, yes." He opened the box. Inside, a simple silver band, engraved with a tiny wave. The girls helped pick it. They said it should look like the sea at dawn because that's when everything feels most hopeful. "It's perfect. Elena Ruiz, will you marry me? Will you take on a widower who forgets his phone and 2 girls who already think you hung the moon and a life that smells like sawdust and sea salt? Will you let us be your family?" The cafe had gone quiet around them. Or maybe Elena just couldn't hear anything over the roar of her own heart. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." The other diners applauded. Nate slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. And through the window, Elena could see Mrs. Chen's blue hatchback in the parking lot. 2 small faces pressed against the glass. Yellow raincoats glowing under the streetlights. They'd been waiting, keeping watch, making sure their father got his happy ending. Spring arrived with wedding planning that was equal parts joyful and chaotic. The girls appointed themselves co-coordinators, filling notebooks with ideas that ranged from practical to fantastical. They wanted the ceremony on the floating dock. They wanted to release butterflies. They wanted a cake shaped like a lighthouse. They wanted their mother's favorite flowers, white peonies, even though those wouldn't be in season. "We can make paper ones," Luna suggested during one planning session at the cottage. "Like the boats. Daddy's good at folding things." Nate looked up from the boat he was repairing in the corner of the living room, repurposed as workspace during a rainy April weekend. "I fold boats in basic envelopes. That's the extent of my origami skills. YouTube has tutorials. Mira said, with the confidence of the digital native generation. "We can learn." They learned. The kitchen table became a paper peony factory, the four of them sitting together in the evenings, folding and shaping white tissue paper into flowers that actually looked credible. Elena's fingers cramped. Nate swore creatively when the girls weren't listening. But slowly, flower by flower, they built bouquets that would have made Sarah proud. Elena moved into the cottage in May, her belongings fitting surprisingly easily into the spaces Nate had cleared. Her books joined his on the shelves. Her coffee mug hung next to his in the kitchen. Her wetsuit dried beside the girls' life jackets on the porch. The first night, lying in Nate's bed that was now their bed, she waited for panic that didn't come. Instead, she felt the settled peace of arriving somewhere she was meant to be. "What are you thinking?" Nate asked in the darkness. "That I should have been stood up years ago." His laugh rumbled through his chest where her head rested. 17 minutes. Technically, I wasn't that late. Late enough to change everything. June brought the summer solstice and the longest day of the year. They'd chosen it deliberately for the wedding date. Maximum light, maximum hope. The morning arrived, clear and bright, ocean calm as glass. Elena woke in Lena's guest room where tradition had exiled her the night before. Her sister already awake and watching her with the satisfied expression of a matchmaker vindicated. "I told you he was perfect for you," Lena said, handing her coffee. "You told me he built boats and was quiet. You failed to mention the daughters, or the dead wife, or the emotional complexity. Would you have gone if I told you all that?" Probably not. Exactly. Sometimes you have to trick people into their own happiness. The ceremony was set for 6:30 in the evening, golden hour, the time when light turned everything magic. Elena spent the day in pleasant chaos. Her sister and mother and a handful of close friends filling the house with laughter and mimosas and the kind of warm disorder that came from women who loved each other, preparing for something important. Her dress was simple tea-length ivory lace with cap sleeves, chosen because it was beautiful, but also because she could move in it, could walk the dock without tripping, could hug the girls without worrying about crushing yards of tulle. At 6:15, Lena drove her to the cottage. The gravel road had been decorated with paper lanterns that would glow once the sun set. Guests were already gathering, maybe 40 people total, intimate and intentional. Folding chairs faced the water. The floating dock extended into the calm bay, its railings wrapped in garlands of real ivy and paper peonies. At the dock's end, Nate waited. He wore a dark blue suit that made his eyes look like deep water. His hair actually combed for once, though the wind was already working to undo that effort. Beside him stood his best man, Harold Peterson, the owner of the Marigold, who'd become Nate's closest friend over years of boat repairs and shared grief. And on either side, in dresses the color of seafoam, stood Mira and Luna. They'd debated titles. Flower girls felt wrong. Bridesmaids seemed too formal. Finally, they'd settled on no title at all. They were simply Mira and Luna, standing witness to their father's second chance at love. The ceremony was short, officiated by a retired Coast Guard captain who'd known Sarah and had watched Nate rebuild his life, plank by plank. He spoke about storms and safe harbors, about the way love could surprise you in the wreckage. Elena and Nate had written their own vows. She went first, her voice carrying across the water. "I came to a cafe 6 months ago, expecting nothing, and found everything. I found a family built on courage and love and paper boats with candles. I promised to honor the woman who came before me, to help keep her light alive for these girls who carry her in their hearts. I promise to show up even when I'm scared, to choose this family every day, to make space for both grief and joy, because that's what love requires." Nate's hands shook as he held hers. 6 months ago, I was 17 minutes late and thought I'd lost my chance. But 2 brave girls walked through the rain and gave me back my future. You didn't just say yes to me, Elena. You said yes to all of us, to our broken, beautiful chaos. You taught me that love isn't about perfect timing. It's about showing up. It's about building something strong enough to weather the storms. He slipped a matching silver band onto her finger, the twin to her engagement ring. I promise to be worth the wait, he finished. Every single day. The captain pronounced them married. Nate kissed her while the small crowd applauded and the lighthouse beam swept over them even though the sky was still bright, its automated system indifferent to daylight or ceremony. Mira and Luna rushed forward, wrapping their arms around Elena and Nate, A four-person hug that nearly sent them all into the bay. Laughter and tears mixed. Someone's flowers got crushed. No one cared. The reception happened right there, on the beach and porch and spilling into the cottage. Captain Rico had catered with fish tacos, naturally. The cake was vanilla, with lemon curd. Shaped like a lighthouse, with fondant waves at its base. Fairy lights strung between posts created a canopy of stars as the sun finally set. But before the dancing and the toasts and the cutting of the cake, there was one more tradition to honor. As twilight deepened, Nate gathered everyone at the water's edge. He produced paper boats, dozens of them, pre-folded and waiting. He handed them out to each guest along with tea lights. "We have a family tradition," he said, his arm around Elena's waist. The girls pressed close on either side. "Of sending light to the people we love. Tonight, we send it together." They lit the candles as full darkness fell. 43 paper boats with 43 flames. The guests waded into the shallows and set them floating. The current caught them, carrying them out toward the lighthouse, a flotilla of light moving across dark water. Elena stood between Nate and the girls, watching the boats drift. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about coral reefs and research vessels and the years she'd spent building walls against exactly this kind of vulnerability, about a blind date and 2 girls in yellow raincoats and the courage it took to let yourself be found. "What are you thinking about?" Luna asked, slipping her hand into Elena's. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Mira took her other hand. "Do you miss the coral reefs? The research?" It was a question she'd asked herself 100 times since declining the Australia position. The honest answer was complicated. Yes, she missed fieldwork. Yes, she sometimes wondered about the path not taken. But standing here, watching light float across water while her family surrounded her, she found the question mattered less than it used to. "I miss parts of it," Elena said truthfully. "But I don't miss it more than I love this." "You could do both," Nate said quietly. "We never talked about that. You could take the girls and me to Indonesia for a summer, teach them about coral, let them see that part of your world." Elena turned to look at him, surprised. "You'd do that?" "I build boats. Boats are portable. So are families." He kissed her temple. "You shouldn't have to choose between the work you love and the people you love. We can figure out how to hold both." The last paper boat disappeared into darkness, its light winking out or simply moving beyond sight. The guests drifted back toward the cottage where music had started. Someone's phone connected to a speaker, playing old folk songs that Sarah had loved. Nate led Elena into a slow dance on the sand, the girls joining them, all 4 swaying together in approximation of rhythm. Other couples paired off. Lena danced with Harold Peterson, both of them laughing about something. Mrs. Chen supervised the cake with the authority of someone who'd survived raising 5 children and knew exactly how to prevent frosting catastrophes. The party lasted until the tide changed, until small children started drooping against their parents' shoulders, until the night grew cold enough that people began hunting for sweaters and making motions toward departure. Guests left in clusters, calling congratulations and thanks, their headlights disappearing up the gravel road one by one. Mrs. Chen took the girls home with her for the night, giving Elena and Nate privacy for their wedding night, though not before Mira and Luna extracted promises of pancakes in the morning. Finally, they were alone. The cottage was a disaster of flowers and half-eaten cake and discarded shoes. They'd clean it tomorrow. Tonight, they walked to the floating dock one more time, still in their wedding clothes, and sat at the end where they'd set their own paper boats adrift. The lighthouse beam passed over them. Regular, constant. A reminder that some lights never went out, they just changed form. "Do you think she knows?" Elena asked, not needing to specify who. "I think she sent 2 little girls in yellow raincoats to make sure I didn't miss my chance," Nate said. "So yes, I think she knows, and I think she approves." They sat in comfortable silence, feet dangling over the water, shoulder to shoulder, watching the lighthouse do its patient work of guiding ships through darkness. "Thank you," Nate said eventually. "For what?" "For waiting, for staying, for loving us, even though we're complicated and messy and come with more baggage than most people would sign up for." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "You came with 2 extraordinary daughters and a heart big enough to hold both grief and new love. That's not baggage. That's treasure." The lighthouse beam swept over them again, and Elena closed her eyes, feeling the moment settle into her bones. This dock, this man, this family she'd stumbled into by accident or fate. or the sheer determined will of two 6-year-old girls who refused to let their father's happiness sink. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, sitting alone in a cafe, ready to give up on love entirely. That woman felt like a stranger now. Or maybe not a stranger. Maybe just an earlier version of herself who hadn't yet learned that the best things in life often arrived 17 minutes late, carried by children in yellow raincoats who understood that hope was worth fighting for. "I love you," she said into the darkness. "I love you too," Nate replied. "All of us do. You're stuck with us now." "Good," Elena said. "I was hoping for stuck." They stayed until the cold drove them inside, then climbed into bed still wearing their wedding clothes because they were too tired and too happy to bother changing. Nate fell asleep almost immediately, his breathing evening out into the rhythm Elena had grown to love. But she stayed awake a while longer, listening to the ocean and the wind chimes and the particular silence of a house waiting for its children to come home. Tomorrow, Mira and Luna would return. There would be pancakes shaped like seagulls and stories about their sleepover with Mrs. Chen and the normal, beautiful chaos of family life. There would be boats to repair and classes to teach, and the ongoing work of blending lives and histories into something new. But tonight, Elena let herself simply feel grateful. For blind dates and patient sisters. For boat emergencies and paper peonies. For two little girls brave enough to walk through rain and tell a stranger that their father was worth waiting for. She'd waited. And she'd found that sometimes the best love stories don't begin with perfect timing or flawless planning. Sometimes they begin with being 17 minutes late and 2 yellow raincoats and the radical courage to believe that broken things can be made beautiful again. The lighthouse beams swept through the window one more time, and Elena finally closed her eyes and let sleep take her, knowing that when she woke, she'd be home. Sometimes love doesn't arrive on time. Sometimes it's 17 minutes late, carried by children who refuse to let hope sink. Sometimes you walk into a cafe expecting nothing and walk out with a family built on tides and trust and second chances. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find that the life you planned and the life you're living are two different things entirely. And the one you're living is better than anything you could have imagined. Elena Ruiz had walked into the Salty Anchor Cafe 6 months ago looking for coffee and conversation. She'd found a harbor instead, and she'd finally learned to anchor there, surrounded by the people who'd taught her that love wasn't about perfection or timing or having all the answers. It was about showing up, even in the rain, especially in the rain. If this story touched your heart, we'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. These stories live because you keep them alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And if you've ever been 17 minutes late to something that changed your life, drop your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it.